So good afternoon, Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this, as we like to call it, utility-friendly weather day. So thank you, keep that heat up. My name's Peggy Kelsey, I'm board chair of the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and I would like to start today's meeting by giving a warm welcome to some new GMC members who are joining us today. I'll start with Mara Lord. Mara, where are you? Oh, there you are. Mara, could you just stand, please? Mara Lord is Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Welcome to you. Krista Pankop, hope I pronounced that right. Great, please stand. Principal at Baker Tilly. We have a double congratulations coming up and a welcome. Kimo Ayun, who's in the back. Welcome, Kimo, and congratulations. Kimo is the new president of Marquette University. And Andy Stith, also joining us today, the president of Cristo Rey. Hello, Andy. We're excited to get to know each of you better and work together with you on the GMC priorities. Joining you are other new members we will introduce at future meetings, including Tim Albrecht, Group President at Milwaukee Tool, who was planning to be here today and then got called away. I'd say the GMC is off to a great start in 2025. As we begin a new year, I want to thank you all for your unwavering commitment to the GMC in 2024. We're a full year into our new strategic plan, and we've made great strides with our pillars of fiscal strength, public safety, infrastructure, and education. We know there is much more to accomplish. As our founding slogan says, it can be done, and with your great engagement, it is being done. I've had the pleasure of acting as board chair since 2023, helping to guide the organization through the adoption and implementation of our new strategic plan and enhanced member engagement activities. And like all good things, my two-year term must come to an end. Rest assured, I will remain a steadfast member of the GMC and its board of directors following the end of my term next month. So you're stuck with me in this position for another month. But today, I am very pleased to announce that the board of directors has selected the individual who will assume the role of GMC board chair at the February annual meeting, and he's with us today. I'm very excited to announce that the GMC's next board chair is Dave Anderson. Dave, please stand. So Dave, you can sit if you want. I was going to make you remain standing, as my friends in the South say, while I brag on you for a little bit. Dave is a senior vice president and the senior executive for Southeast Wisconsin for BMO, formerly known in this market as M&I Bank. He brings a wealth of knowledge, leadership, and passion to the GMC chair position, with over 30 years of banking and board service experience, including as a GMC board member since 2018. Dave currently serves on the boards of Wisconsin Manufacturing and Commerce and the WMC Foundation, and on the advisory board for the commercial banking program at Marquette University. He also has served on the boards of the Better Business Bureau, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and the West Suburban YMCA. He has served as an advisory board member for Our Steel Graduate School of Banking at the University of Wisconsin, and as a member of the former Dean Brian Till's College of Business Leadership Council at Marquette University. To say Dave is familiar with our community is an understatement. Dave was also an integral part of the development of the GMC's strategic plan, offering valuable insight as a member of the planning committee. He will be officially installed as the chair of the next February annual meeting with a two-year term. Dave, thank you for joyfully and without hesitation agreeing to serve our community in this way. I have no doubt your enthusiasm, desire, and leadership will catapult the success of the GMC and of Milwaukee. Now rest up before February's meeting. Again, another hand for Dave Anderson. And now I would like to introduce the host of today's meeting, Chad Tesmer. Chad is the executive director of the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center and will share further insight as to how MIAC has transformed this space into a center for the entire community. Please welcome Chad.
Thank you, Peggy. Good morning, afternoon, everybody. Congratulations, Dave. Welcome to the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center, as we affectionately refer to it as MIAC, with a C, not a D. Otherwise, it becomes MIAD, and people go in the wrong direction. So on behalf of our board, our founding members at First Stage and MISO, welcome. If it's your first time here or you're coming back, welcome to our community center. It's really nice to see so many friendly faces here today. I refer to MIAC as a community center with intentionality. I think you'll discover, again, whether it's your first time here or you've been here many, many times, that we are more than just a high quality, highly inclusive destination for arts and education and culture. We are a community center. And every community center in the history of ever has been grounded on an identity. And the real special ones, the real high impact ones, they grow through that our identity, right? And our identity is young people and creativity. That's what we do every single day here at MIAC. And when there are conversations that are centered around generational leadership and creativity, we hope that MIAC will be a home for those conversations like it is today. So we're really pleased to have you here because we know it's a critical conversation. What we're going to talk about today is hugely important, and the time to talk about it was 10 years ago, but it's certainly now, right? The time is now, and it needs to happen in this room, not just physically, but with the folks that are in this room today, right? You are the change agents of Milwaukee, and we know that the cultural community, what it contributes to southeastern Wisconsin economically, socially, educationally, frankly, I don't think we need to make that case anymore. But what we need to do is make the case for actual change, for doing the work to make sure that centers like MIAC and the Marcus Center and the Rep and the Ballet, that we can sustain for generations to come. And if we don't confront the change ourselves, the change we're left with will be disastrous for the young people who call MIAC home every single day. So I am wildly optimistic about what we can do. And I am really optimistic that you all can make that change because we've seen it work before, and this is where I'll do the humble brag that isn't so humble. It's what happens every day at MIAC. MIAC is an active collaboration, right? And it's not like a successories collaboration with a kitten holding on on the branch, right? We're doing the gritty, hard, transparent work of collaboration so that we're bigger than the sum of our parts. And I think that's what the community, the cultural community, needs more of in terms of resources and opportunities, and yeah, spaces too. I'm just one nonprofit leader with a loud opinion, and you're going to hear from way smarter people than I am. But I'm pretty sure that the support for our sector will come when we demonstrate that we have the capacity to do more of what MIAC is doing right now. So I want to thank Joel and Heather and the entire GMC team back there. I want to thank Anne Marie and the team at UPAF for everything they're doing to lead this conversation. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for being here today. If there's one thing we know about how we can solve this moment in time, it's about showing up. So you've shown up today. The second thing you can do is come back, right? So come back again. We welcome you here at MIAC any old time you want to have a conversation like we're having today. So thank you. Joel?
Thank you, Chad. I hope many of you have been in this room or in MIAC in the past. When I walked back in today, my daughter, who's now a freshman at the University of Richmond, I hearkened back to the days when she used to do her steel pan drum here through MISO and at MIAC. And I think lots of us have had experiences like that, and we know what a place of vibrancy this is. The resources that have been poured into this in the last several years have only made it that much better as a community resource. So again, I echo Chad in thanking you for being here, but I also want to thank Chad for what MIAC does and for who you are in this community and in the Bronzeville, Brewers Hill, and MLK neighborhoods. An example of the collaborative efforts that lead to greater things in Milwaukee. I just have a couple of updates to give today before we go on to the program. One thing I wanted to do was just to update people on the efforts that we've been engaged with the city on fiscal strength over the last year plus. You'll recall that it was just a little more than a year ago that we completed the operational review with Ernst & Young for the city of Milwaukee. As a result of that work, the mayor appointed the city's first innovation director, whose first task it was to follow up on some of the specific options that were outlined in that report. And the first budget that we could have an impact on was passed last fall, started calendar January 1. And we outlined in correspondence that we sent out last week that at this point, about $10 million in either additional revenue or savings through efficiencies has been realized to date in the changes in that 2025 budget. For those who were part of investing in that, we have particular appreciation, but for those, and you see some of the members who have been involved in the work on the screen here, we appreciate all the work that has gone on with it. When you do a report like that, and it happened at a time when the city truly was in crisis and unsure of whether they were going to be viable in the future. Because of that work, because of the work of the mayor, the county executives, our partners at MMAC and others, the city was able to find a path forward. This is not the report that Rob's talking about today, but Rob and the Policy Forum do many reports on where the city is. And while nobody is on Easy Street, they're in a much better place than they were for a generation, and that's due to the work that has been done collectively. But we're off to a good start. We're not going to stop that, and that work continues under the leadership of David Gay and Betsy Brenner, who continue to convene. The first convening of that Fiscal Strength Committee will be towards the end of January here in 2025. A couple other issues to deal with on the issue of public safety. Dan Bader and Renell Lucas will reconvene our GMC group later in January. One of the things that's happening in that landscape is that there are some significant changes that are on the horizon for those who are part of the infrastructure of creating a safer Milwaukee. This week, Kent Laverne will take the pledge, the oath of office as the new Milwaukee County DA, replacing retired District Attorney John Chisholm. Tom Reed, whose wife Ann is in the audience today, retired just last week from the State Public Defender's Office. And last week it was also announced that Ashanti Hamilton would be leaving the city's Office of Community Wellness and Safety to take a job in the private sector. First, I really want to thank and honor the work that people like John and Tom have done for decades in Milwaukee, and Ashanti over the last decade or so, and a couple of years in the job at the Office of Community Wellness and Safety. They really have sought to bring a community-wide focus to innovative solutions to our public safety challenges. While we're eager to continue our work with their offices and with their successors, their efforts have been noteworthy and important, and we'll honor them by continuing to forge ahead. One area that kind of overlaps between infrastructure and public safety, for those of you like I who parked across the street today at the United Way, you walked over and experienced some of what the city has been doing with road diets. Along Walnut and Pleasant Street, what used to be, and I think they have seen some results, what used to be in some ways a challenging thing to get across, they have slimmed down those streets, they've added bike and parking lanes, they've done some other things around here. And I think having talked with some of the partners here at MIAC, I think it has helped the neighborhood here, but it's also something that they're doing elsewhere in the community. And we're working with the city to make sure that we can measure those results moving forward. On the issue of education, which will dominate a lot of the conversation this year in Milwaukee, some people may be aware that the MPS board met over the weekend to pare down the list of potential superintendent candidates. They're going to hold initial interviews later in January. And the last meeting we had included a conversation with the interim superintendent, and we will continue to have many conversations around education. The legislative session in Madison just started in the last few days, and I know a number of us are very interested in what kind of proactive solutions we can also look at towards K-12 education in this current session and moving forward. So much more to come on that. I also, there will be conversations, and Langston from our staff leads those around early ed, around K-12, and on higher ed. And I want to join Peggy in welcoming Dr. Ayoun to the GMC and also to my alma mater at Marquette University. He's no stranger to MU, having been around for several years, no stranger to the community, but I think we can all be part of enhancing and furthering Mike Lovell's legacy by continuing to welcome Dr. Ayoun with open arms and ensure that he can make the kind of connections in the community that Marquette seeks and that we seek from all of higher ed. We've had the chance to spend a little time together in the last few months, and I really look forward to working with you, Kimo, moving forward. Finally, on the issue around infrastructure, after our meeting in November, we convened about 40 lakefront stakeholders late in 2024. We're going to have a follow-up to that before the end of January around a couple of collaborative efforts to attract resources to, in some ways, fill in a few of the missing pieces that are on the lakefront at this point. Those are discussions that include the city, the state, any number of other stakeholders, and the private organizations that run operations on the lakefront. We were really enthused to have the engagement that we did in that initial conversation and excited about where we are going to move forward on that. There'll be other conversations around infrastructure, and John Kissinger has volunteered to help with these around things like the continuing discussion over the ultimate result for I-794, what the city is going to be doing with the roughly 60 acres that used to be the Northridge Mall. These are important steps for where the future is and reasons for us to be engaged in those conversations as well. Finally, we're ready to launch this week the Milwaukee Appraiser Diversity Initiative, and because I don't want to steal his thunder, I'm going to welcome my colleague Michael Wesley to share an update about our work in the initiative and a handful of special guests who are joining us today. Michael?
I'm a lot shorter than Joe, so I'll bring this down. Thank you so much. I'm Michael Wesley, the project manager for the Milwaukee Appraiser Diversity Initiative, or as like we like to call it, MADI. So over the past 2 years, the GMC has brought a lot of updates to this membership on progress on where we are with the Milwaukee Appraiser Diversity Initiative. Today, we're proud to announce that we have selected 10 talented individuals who are in the crowd today here at this table. If we can just give them a brief round of applause. And you'll see them up here on the screen to go through our first cohort. So we're extremely excited about it. It was a very, very hard process in determining the 10 that we want to choose. We had about 90 applicants. So we had to really delve through some talented folks, but we think we got the great 10 for this first cohort. We'll be hosting our MADI launch event this Friday at the GMC offices. I just want to thank a few of our sponsors, US Bank, Wells Fargo, United Way, MGIC, Associated Bank, Greater Milwaukee Urban League, and McKissick Learning. These folks have been very, very supportive to getting this MADI initiative launched off the ground. So thank you so much for your continued support. Joe?
So fortunately, my mic adjustment was already done. Another short guy coming up to follow Joel. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rob Henken. I am both the immediate past president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum and the still relatively new executive director for the Hertzfeld Foundation. And I am kicking off today's program by refreshing folks' memory on a report that the Wisconsin Policy Forum released this past May, setting the stage for our panel discussion. And as you will see, this is actually pretty cool for me because I'm wearing both hats. I keep on shifting between these two various roles that I have. Today, I'm one and the same. So again, I'm just going to do some very brief stage setting for all of you to get to the more exciting part of the program, which is the panel discussion. First of all, again, the name of this report, Curtain Time. It was commissioned by several leaders of the philanthropic community. We have Steve Radke here from Northwestern Mutual. I saw Dan Bader in the room. Bader Philanthropies also commissioned this. And the Hertzfeld Foundation, which I wasn't yet a part of, but we have our vice president, Julie Doms, who was, and a board member, Katie Heil. And I don't see Alec in the room, but I thought maybe he was coming, but at any rate. So the purpose of this report was to sort of level set where the performing arts sector in Milwaukee stood as we were emerging from the pandemic, as hopefully audiences were starting to recover, but there was still a feeling that there was a great amount of need and a very large amount of pressure on local philanthropy to try to help our sector meet that need. I can sum up for you in just a couple slides. This is a dense report. For those of you who know the Policy Forum, our reports tend to be rather dense. This one's 40 to 50 pages. It is available on our website. But in just 2 slides, let me sort of summarize a couple of the key findings. And none of this is really going to be surprising to most of the people in this room. Many of you sit on boards. Many of you are personal contributors. Many of you are actively involved in the arts, and you've been seeing this and experiencing this firsthand. But over time, what we have seen, number one, is real challenges on the program service revenue side for our performing arts groups. This clearly did not start with the pandemic and with the precipitous drops in audiences that occurred naturally as a result of the pandemic. It didn't occur through any mismanagement or lack of appropriate community-wide support for the sector, but in many respects, we have a changing world here, and getting people to leave their homes and their video screens and come out to see performances, live performances, I think is just a challenge that is being felt not only here in Milwaukee, but there's been a lot of attention to it throughout the country. So as there have been challenges bringing in people to see shows for those performing arts groups like the ballet that are also dependent on revenue from their educational services. Also challenges due to the variety of competing things that are out there for our children and their time. But what this is showing you is, and there are sort of, this is just the 6 UPAF cornerstone performing arts groups. Looking at 3 distinctive years sort of is not the best way to do this. I'm doing this for brevity's sake, but there may have been anomalies in given years. But if you look to the far left is showing you 2012, the far right is showing you 2022. And this is the percentage of each of these groups' budgets that is program service revenue, which is mostly earned revenue from ticket sales and from educational offerings. There are other smaller sources depending on the organization. And you can see if you look at the far left bar to the far right bar, almost across the board, the percentage of their revenue budgets that is program service revenue has fallen over time. Now, one more really critical caveat about this slide. 2022 is not an ideal year. It was, at the time we put out the report, the last full year for which we had data. Obviously, the pandemic was not in our rearview mirror in 2022, so audiences clearly had not recovered to the extent that they have already recovered just in the ensuing couple of years. But I would submit to you that the general story of challenges on the program service revenue front is still an accurate story. At the same time, we have seen sort of naturally growing reliance on what we are calling in this busy slide total unrestricted contributed income. For the most part, that is philanthropic support. And so as challenges with earned revenue have built greater propensity to lean on philanthropy. The good news is we have an enormously generous philanthropic sector in this community, and in many ways, philanthropy has indeed stepped up. By the way, if you're wondering, don't look at the MSO part because of their big campaign for their building. Their numbers are skewed because their philanthropic dollars were going into the capital side. This is showing you operating. But again, for the most part, you have seen, if you look at that bar to the far left and compare it to the bar to the far right, that reliance as a percentage of the overall revenue pie on this unrestricted contributed income has grown. So the question is this a sustainable situation? Again, these are data 2022, and so we would certainly hope to see that those earned revenue percentages going back up. In an ideal world, and here I can speak now from my Hertzfeld hat, again, many foundations stepped up in a big way. And again, I can't brag about that because I wasn't there, but I know in the case of the Hertzfeld Foundation, and I know in the case of other foundations, there was a recognition that this was going to be some really rough sledding for a couple years for our arts groups. And so donations increase. So is that sustainable to the extent that the earned revenue side of the equation does not edge back up, and to the extent that because of inflation, it doesn't have to go so far back up that it makes it a moot point anyway. So those are a couple of data points. We also spoke as part of this research process with many of the people in this room, dozens of arts sector leaders, dozens of people who serve on boards, dozens of individuals who work for performing arts organizations, and essentially three overriding issues. Number one is we've done a lot of great things on the capital side. We are sitting here today in a prime example of what can be done to establish new and exciting performing arts venues and home bases, and doing that in parts of our city that could really use an economic jolt. Of course, the new symphony building is another prime example. We have several very impressive projects that are in the works today. $250 million plus of capital projects over the preceding 5 years when we released this report, and more to come. And virtually unanimously, people we spoke to said that this is causing increasing tension, not only because these reports are, or these requests are so steep, but also because it really, the need and the want to try to accommodate some of these capital requests is obviously having an impact on also trying to accommodate donations to help on the operating side of the equation. So that's number one. Number two, and Anne Marie is going to be up on the stage and not far from now from UPAF, but UPAF is undergoing change. And there was a lot of change that just happened this past summer, which I imagine we'll get into a little bit during the panel discussion. And there are still continued questions about whether that model of workplace giving and trying to, for just the performing arts part of the arts sector, organize and coordinate corporate giving to the arts, is that still the best model for our community going forward? Lots of differing opinions on that topic. And finally, and this I know is a prime issue for discussion today, the fact that as of 2023, we were 50th of the 50 states in terms of annual state support for arts and culture. So this is not county or city or local support. This is support that is flowing from state government to support the state arts agency and essentially provide a match for National Endowment for the Arts funding. But you can see, I think in 2024, we improved to 49th out of 50, still not much to brag about. But, you know, not only, and this is per capita, not only were we number 50, but you can see how far below we were of the 50-state median. And our neighbor just to the west, Minnesota, you can see what they do and what other Midwestern states do on a per capita basis compared to what we do. So these are three big drivers for the challenges that we are facing. I just want to wrap up by saying in the report, we look to some peer communities for some insights. And I just want to leave you with a few from each of three cities that we looked at. We looked at Pittsburgh, and what we were impressed by there was they have a cultural trust, which not only essentially serves as a repository for various types of philanthropic support, but also plays a role in terms of service sharing, in terms of being a vehicle to be able to offer pooled healthcare, joint marketing, bulk purchasing, things like that to performing arts groups in the city of Pittsburgh. And we think that in addition to trying to grow the revenue pie, or what this report concluded, in addition to trying to grow the revenue pie, there has to be work in the area of greater service sharing and collaboration to also try to make the expenditure side of the equation more efficient. Cincinnati was a really good model to look at and continues to be a good model to look at because they have a strategic vision for not only their performing arts, but their arts sector as a whole. They do a really impressive job of, again, pooling their resources and strategically distributing them in a way that is not only good for the organizations themselves, 3-year general operating grants, for example, a sort of a methodology that determines the mix between support for larger arts groups and smaller arts groups, but it's all tied to a strategic vision that the community got together to formulate and to support, and it now drives decision making. And then finally, Kansas City we looked at, which really the philanthropic community there, in part because they have greater public sector support for the arts, the philanthropic community there is really focused on the smaller performing arts groups and on the ecosystem as a whole, and some of the larger groups are taken care of in other ways. Finally, just 3 insights and conclusions. First of all, the challenges that I'm talking about today and that we identified in this report, we did a similar report 10 years ago, similar challenges cited. Bottom line, though, is that they were exacerbated by the pandemic, by high inflation, and arguably far worse today than they were even 10 years ago when we last looked at this. And one of the things that this increasing reliance on philanthropy does is it just it foments the competition among the various arts groups. And competition, as we all know, is a good thing in many respects, but to the extent that you're also trying to promote collaboration among arts groups and they are all competing for these scarce dollars, it makes that job tougher to accomplish. And so concern. A continued status quo means essentially survival of the fittest, and these groups essentially having to compete for this finite amount of philanthropic capacity. And again, not only is that a problem in terms of ensuring that we have the breadth of arts groups in this community that ideally we want to have, but it's also potentially an issue because of what it does in terms of discouraging strategic partnerships. And then finally, and I know we'll be talking about this some more, one of the potential action steps that we suggested going forward is some type of a convening. thought being given to creating a strategic vision similar to what we observed in Cincinnati, considering some of the other things that we observed from these peer cities and elevating that push for public funding. I think I don't have to tell all of you that for anyone who thinks, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea, the first entity that comes to mind as a potential leader for such a convening is the Greater Milwaukee Committee. We know your plate is full, and I think that's one reason we're going to be talking today. So that is it for me. I think I'm going to move over and sit on the panel now. Change your hat now. Okay, change my hat.
I like these chairs. Remember the dating game? Remember, for those of us who are old enough to remember that, this is what these, there'd be a curtain somewhere. Okay, I've gotten off to a bad start already. Thank you, Rob, for that. And first of all, just very briefly want to introduce our panelists. To my immediate right, Ann Sayers, who's the Secretary of the Department of Tourism for the state of Wisconsin. I think some of you know, I think today may be this week is my 3-year anniversary at the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and I spent 3 years in the administration of Governor Evers as the Secretary of the Department of Administration and got to work with Ann during that time. So we're going to let her introduce herself in a second, but then Steve Radke, who's the president of the Northwestern Mutual Foundation and very engaged civically in Milwaukee, and then again, Rob Henken, he changed hats and he's no longer got his Wisconsin Policy Forum hat on. He's now got his Hertzfeld Foundation hat on. So we're just going to have a little discussion here. I've got a couple questions, and we've had some opportunity to have dialogue together over the last several days. We were going to share our mic, but that's okay. We can just pass it down here. But I'm going to give Ann just an opportunity. Ann, why don't you just introduce yourself? Talk a little bit about the Department of Tourism, the connection between the Department of Tourism and the arts culture sector in Milwaukee and statewide.
Thank you. Well, it is so nice to be here, Joel. Thank you for the invitation, for all of you for making the time and space for what is going to be a really important conversation, I think. Yes, so the Wisconsin Department of Tourism is Wisconsin's smallest cabinet-level agency. We are just 27 people. That's less than 1/2% of all of the state employees. We are an $18 million agency that is also less than 1/2% of the entire state government budget. So we are small, but we are mighty. Our industry is $25 billion in economic impact each year. We're 7% of the state's gross domestic product. And sitting within our agency, sort of, and this gets a little governmenty, but it is the Wisconsin Arts Board. They are 4 staff. They're less than $1 million. Our job statutorily, we do not fund infrastructure. We are not regulatory. We are a promotional agency. So we do our work by promoting Wisconsin through marketing and public relations mostly. And you may know us as Travel Wisconsin. That's our destination marketing organization brand. Now, the Arts Board is totally separate. They are their own board. They have their own committees. They issue their own grants. We do share a copier. But the reason I felt really strongly about being here and so glad to be invited is just because a thriving arts community is so important to tourism, and I think vice versa as well. But if you just put yourself in the mind of a traveler who's thinking, okay, I've got this many precious vacation days and I have this much saved up for vacation this year, I want to find a place that's what? You want a place that has fun outdoor recreation opportunities. You want a place that has unique stays, probably a thriving culinary scene. And one destination, let's say, is known for a thriving arts community, and the other isn't. You are so much more likely to select the one that has more options for you and your travel party, where you are more likely to come home with the kinds of memories that you wanted to make with those limited resources that you have on vacation. So that is just one reason why tourism is so deeply invested in this. And I assume we'll talk about more.
Can I have my microphone back?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, and Ann started to do this, but the context of this and the reason why we gathered here, it was people from the arts and cultural community here who are starting that dialogue, some of which was, it predates the report that Rob was talking about, but also stakeholders from the community here who realize that, Rob did a good job of outlining some of the challenges, that what we're doing on the path we're going now is not necessarily sustainable, and how do we continue to ensure that southeastern Wisconsin is a place that attracts and retains quality young people and people who we need to keep the economy thriving, but also how do we ensure that we have the type of quality of life and the things that are going to continue to elevate Milwaukee and elevate southeastern Wisconsin on the stage. And so, Steve, the question I would have to kind of start with you is there aren't many organizations in Milwaukee and corporations who have as much of an investment in southeastern Wisconsin and kind of a go-to player than Northwestern Mutual. You've made $1 billion worth of physical investment in your campus, or will, having done that in the next few years. You have other priorities that you work on related to education, the national efforts that you do around childhood cancer. Can you just give kind of a little bit of a perspective on the landscape here? Rob had the one a slide, and I wrote down 3 times. It said tension, it said intensity, it said intense, like the perspective that you can provide as a funder for most every worthwhile organization, not only in the arts and culture, but social service and education. Like, just give a sense of that tension and the perspective of kind of how you see the field and the landscape right now.
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Joel. But it's right, and I like the way you framed up the question that while this is a very important dialogue, we're making these decisions not at all in a vacuum. When you're prefacing the agenda for the GMC over the coming year, there are a lot of demands in the community, and we see these on the philanthropic side, certainly. We've talked before, we all love this city. It's a wonderful place, but it has its share of issues. Probably topping the list are the entrenched racial disparities that we at Northwestern Mutual have been trying to work on seemingly for decades to try to make some difference. I had a chance to speak to this group last year about our work around affordable housing. Milwaukee is the second worst city in the nation for African American home ownership, and we're trying to make a difference there. That's an intractable problem, and we feel like you can't have. It's much harder to have a job, to be well educated, to be healthy, to build intergenerational wealth if you don't have a home. So that's a serious problem we're trying to confront. Closely related to that are problems with education. I think the last stat I saw was I think 20% of children in Milwaukee are at the grade level in English or math. I think it gets down to 1 in 10 for African American children. So we're spending a lot of resources to try to make sure every child in the city has a chance to have a good education. So in some ways, it makes giving to the cultural institutions almost feel like a little luxury in some ways. But at Northwestern Mutual, we do think it's important because we try to recruit and attract people to Milwaukee, and we know that having those important cultural institutions and a great zoo and museums and arts is critical. But then when you look at just in that sector, and in our foundation, we call it our destinations portfolio, I jotted down a list of kind of either recently concluded or still going significant campaigns in the work. And I think you mentioned this, Rob, and many of the people behind those are in this room. So we had obviously the Symphony and its new facility. The Rep has its undertaking going on, the Public Museum and its great new facility. We've certainly had conversations with the Performing Arts Center because they have some additional needs out there. The Art Museum has talked to us about trying to build an endowment. Betty Brinn is going to be looking for a new building. The War Memorial has visited us because they need some infrastructure changes. We've talked about the Skylight. They might need a different home or change of ownership. We had a visit a while ago with the Domes. The Domes needs a $100+ million investment to keep the Domes going on. And I'm not making this one up. Just before I came here, I had a conversation with the head of the Forest Home Cemetery, a historic thing, and it made us think, we call this our destination portfolio. We need a subcategory, the final destination portfolio, if we want to invest in Forest Home Cemetery. So it's interesting when you look at all those demands, and in some ways a common theme behind all of those, if you rattle down the list, is they are all, maybe with the cemetery outstanding, all organizations at one point inextricably linked with the county, right? And the county can't provide the kind of support it used to. And so a lot of these institutions and buildings need, these were all done a generation ago in the 50s or late 60s, and the model has changed and we need a new way to fund all of these things. Then in addition to that, I'll let others speak, when we talk about UPAF and our support for the arts, a lot of our support for the UPAF is through our employee giving, and it is just a very different environment on that front as well, where we have, and again, we try to be one of the largest, having people on campus in downtown Milwaukee, but it's not like it was pre-pandemic. We have a lot more remote employees. We have a lot more employees who aren't in the city at all, or if they are, they're in 3 days a week, they're not in on Fridays going to a show that night. And as a community, we have a lot more employees who are working in Milwaukee, who are with a company that can be headquartered in Boston or Los Angeles or anywhere else. And those people aren't being solicited to give to UPAF because their employers are. So I feel like I'm just kind of the downer here, so talking about all the tension, all the problems. But you asked for okay, my perspective on the landscape, so that's my opening bid.
Thank you. You know the thing about Forest Home Cemetery, people are dying to get in there, Steve. So we have the public sector represented here, Steve, and the private sector, and Rob. Kind of again, you take off the hat from the policy forum and you put it on with philanthropy. And the Hertzfeld Foundation is not the largest, in terms of private philanthropy, but with a clear direction. I think your priorities are civic arts and culture and education, but with a clear direction towards the arts. So, in the time that you've been there and your familiarity with the overall sector, can you just give a kind of a sense of where things are and whether or have you seen any kind of consensus emerging around the sector and funders of a lot of the arts and culture in Milwaukee?
Sure. So again, just starting with the first part of the question. So we are not Northwestern Mutual. We are a relatively small family-based foundation. We have a corpus of about $80 million. So that means we have about $4 million a year to give in grant making. And fortunately, the corpus has grown in recent years, so we've been able to up that amount. But the bottom line is, right now, because of our commitments that we are so proud of to some of the big vital capital projects here, including the REP and the Public Museum. We've tried to stagger in the way we pay off. We have other capital commitments as well, but we will give out about $1.6 million in capital campaign commitment money in 2025. So what started with $4 million goes down to $2.4 million. On top of that, again, in 2022 and 2021 and 2022, our board made a decision. We were going to step up big time. We were going to increase our operating support to roughly 25 to 30 to 40 organizations that we had traditionally supported, cared most deeply about 3/4 of those in the arts. We not only increased our giving, but we gave 3 years worth of general operating grant support, and that expired in 2024. So now we have all of these entities that are accustomed to a higher level of giving and that received 3 years worth and didn't have to worry about it. Has their plight improved now that we have emerged from the pandemic? For the most part, for most of them, yes. But we're in a fix because this is not sustainable for us to maintain both that level of support and the level of support that we have made on the capital side. So again, very similar to what Steve was saying, we just sort of feel like something has to give here.
So I think a lot of the conversation, both in what you did there and talking about the level of kind of operational support, has to do with collaboration and making sure that you can be collaborative in order to be the right kind of advocates. And I'll start with you, but I think this is really for everybody. As a sector, and looking at the state budget, one bit of context. Rob mentioned, Ann mentioned the Arts Board. Rob mentioned that Wisconsin was 49th or 50th. The Arts Board is really the vehicle by which any operational support comes from state government. Ann mentioned it's got a budget of about $1 million, and so for the larger the larger arts groups in Milwaukee, that constitutes about a $20,000 a year contribution that they get. Nothing, but not hugely significant especially when you're talking about, some of the challenges that have happened. So collaboration and advocacy are hugely important to that. And can you just talk a little bit about the context? The governor has not introduced his budget proposal yet. It'll be introduced within the next 4 or 5 weeks. The legislature, the makeup of the legislature has changed. Talk a little bit around advocacy for the arts and culture. How does that look like? What does the landscape look like in Madison for having there be some success? And what are the ingredients that people who have who have a civic viewpoint, people from the arts and culture community, what do we need to know as we think about being advocates this year?
Okay, great question. I have so many thoughts. I'll make it brief, though. So the governor's budget will come out February 18th. And the whole beauty of democracy, right, is that the executive branch and the legislative branch need to agree on our state's budget. And spoiler alert, they are different parties here in the state of Wisconsin. So there's some work to do, and that will be happening between February 18th until statutorily that budget needs to be signed June 30th. The governor, he's my boss, so I'm a little biased, but I feel like he will put something in for the arts, and I don't know what that is or what that'll look like, but I think he has proven historically that he understands Wisconsin is 50th in the nation. And side note, the reason we're 49th is because Georgia dropped. But it's interesting because Georgia has a very strong film community, and I know that's important to folks in this room. So while they are 50th in the nation, they do at least have film. We don't have that either. That was a side note. So the governor is likely to put something in that's good for the arts. That's my guess. Then it goes to the legislature. And while the makeup of the legislature has changed, the very, very important Joint Finance Committee has not. It is 12 Republicans and 4 Democrats, as it has been for the last many sessions. So the work, I think, really needs to focus there. And we have our work cut out for us because there's a misunderstanding about what the arts are in terms of economic development, most specifically. And I shared with Joel going into this. I mean, I've literally heard a member of Joint Finance say, "No one pays me to do my hobby. Why should I pay others to do their hobby?" Which is such an unfortunate statement that shows a disconnect of understanding what the role of the arts in our communities, obviously in Milwaukee, but across the state. We have so much work to do just to explain the role it plays to keep our communities strong, economically viable and competitive, and also to attract workforce, which I think would be a really strong argument to use as you speak with them. So my recommendation here for that period between February and June is to rally behind what the governor puts out, to focus on the economic impact, the economic potential of what we're missing out on, and the competition all around us. It's so frustrating to me every day that Minnesota is #1 in their arts investment. Focus on that. Be united in the how. Like I said, I think the governor's going to put forward good ideas, but if you're going to have other ideas, to be united and not bring that confusion to the legislature or to the Joint Finance Committee, who has a very busy few months ahead of them with not a lot of space for these conversations. Be organized, be streamlined, and drive it home from there. Stay in front of them and make it known at the Joint Finance Committee level.
Steve, just kind of on that same, and again, maybe Rob can weigh in too, just you, in addition to running the foundation, you also manage the government affairs aspects of Northwestern Mutual. You know what good advocacy looks like. In previous conversations, you were talking about this can't be just a Milwaukee thing. Like, just give a sense of what you think good advocacy, especially in the opportunities that might arise over the next few months, looks like in this community.
And you can certainly speak to this as well as I can, and many others in the room have experienced this as well. But I think to say it nicest, there are probably some deep elements of anti-Milwaukee skepticism, or at least Milwaukee skepticism in the state legislature. And I think if many lawmakers feel like, oh, this is just something else for Milwaukee, it will probably not be terribly successful. I think we've had good models in the recent past, though, whether it's kind of changes to shared revenue or education funding, to try to have partnerships with others throughout the state and try to make it a situation where everyone is benefiting and all parts of the state are benefiting, and you can talk to different lawmakers from different areas about how it's helping their communities rather than it being a Milwaukee thing. So I think while our Milwaukee arts community might have the strongest voice and a lot at stake, it might be well for them to figure out a way to perhaps step back a little bit and let others be on the forefront of this, and maybe we can kind of lead from behind or something along those lines, which is tough to do, like when you're really invested and you want to see something done. But I'd welcome others' perspectives, but I think if it is viewed as, oh, this is for Milwaukee, you'd hear a lot of, well, didn't we just do a big thing for the Brewers last year? Didn't we do rattling down the list of, and the legislature has done a lot for Milwaukee recently. But I think you'll start seeing some resentment or resistance along those lines. But again, if you feel differently, and if you do, like, I welcome other perspectives.
Well, and I know we want to get to some conversation at the table, but before that, and I think it leads into this, it's making sure you strike the opportunities that are available. And, so we said the state overall for operational support puts in about $1 million. Over the last few years, you've got examples. The Public Museum was able to get a $40 million cutout in the state's capital budget. In the last state capital budget, there was about $50 million that was set aside for any organization. They could have been academic, educational, social service, the arts and culture, and the Milwaukee Rep got a couple $1 million out of that. But it wasn't just Milwaukee. I think in Rock County, a children's museum got something. There was something else in the Fox Valley. Something kind of for everybody, and maybe Ann, start with you, but then Rob and Steve may want to in. Is that a vehicle for us? Should we be looking at the capital side as maybe one opportunity, because there is evidence that that has been successful in the last few years?
Yeah, okay, great point. So when we talk about the Wisconsin Arts Board, that is, they can fund operations and programming, but the infrastructure side is tougher for them, and that's why the governor put forward these infrastructure capital grants. He's done it twice now, both times completely overprescribed. I think it was $50 million was available for, was it $250 million in requests or something? It was, so that money happily went out the door, but a lot of need remained, and so the question is, should we do it again? And I think that it's tough. That was very, very clearly done with one-time expiring funds. So that is not just, it's not like an existing program. If they fail to pass the state budget on June 30th, the whole state just defaults back to the budget it's already on. I don't think that would renew. That's like one-time funding. It's not actually there. So you have to go fight for it again. So I think it's possible. It was administered through the Department of Administration, and it would be the Joint Finance Committee that again would want to go, do the proactive effort to set it aside and make it happen. But I think there's definitely the need and the case to be made of what's out there.
And not to get into the weeds and to put my policy forum hat back on, but I do think the capital side of the equation might be an easier sell in Madison. Our state has really done a remarkable job in terms of building reserves, maintaining very affordable levels of borrowing. And I just know, again, for a small foundation like ours, if some of that pressure on the capital side was relieved by public sector support, freeing up those dollars to support operations, I think would be ideal. And I guess it would also be ideal. The one other point I don't want to overlook is, what I have come to learn in my 6 months is just what an impressive overall ecosystem of arts offerings we have in this community. And we all justifiably spend a lot of time thinking about how are we going to make sure that our ballet and our symphony and our repertory theater can really prosper. But there are so many smaller groups. And so again, on the foundation side, having some relief on the capital side could give us more capacity to be helpful there.
Maybe I could just add one other thing. When you look back to some of the efforts we're involved in over the last couple of years, I think one element that made them uniquely successful was how united in purpose we were, and how we had a lot of different stakeholders come together. And I'm thinking about the education front and the sales tax, right? And there could have been a lot of different things that people wanted to advocate around, and I think we did a pretty good job as a community to say, look, let's pick the one big thing that we think is going to make the biggest difference, and all be united to try to seek that. I think if even amongst the arts cultural community, if there's not that unanimity, and there isn't, and some pockets are going in looking for one thing and others are going for another, and it makes it a lot easier to end up getting nothing, or like a tiny piece of the pie, rather if everyone is asking for the same thing repeatedly, forcefully, and with one voice.
Yeah,
who does that, and what exactly that request is, I don't know, but I think it should be one request.
And I think that's part of what today is trying to be as a launching point for that discussion, because we do have examples of that success. And Ann mentioned there have been a couple of programs where the state has done capital funding, one with America Rescue Plan dollars. It ended up being $25 million of grant funding for $250 million of requests. At the state, in the state last capital budget, it was $50 million. They got $500 million worth of requests. So I know, in the arts community, part of what they have done is they're going out now to find those other places around the state that didn't get those resources, because those should be your allies and natural advocates for those discussions moving forward. But I think, we all would say that having there be some consensus, or not feeling and understanding that we may be successful, you may not ultimately get what you want this year, but the sector will be better off for it. And I think that's probably a good segue to have Anne Marie come up just for a second before we go to a little bit of dialogue at the tables around where we can go from here. So Anne Marie Scobie-Polacek, the head of UPAF, is just going to talk for a couple seconds here. I've got your mic.
Thanks. Thank you, Joel, and thank you for inviting me. And really, I was taking notes during the panel, so thank you for that. What I will say, just in case anyone doesn't know what UPAF is, United Performing Arts Fund, it supports 14 organizations of arts organizations through Milwaukee, anywhere from tiny organizations like Bel Canto up to the symphony, giving grants anywhere from $60,000, some of our small grants, to the mid-sized grants are $300,000-$400,000. Big grants are more than $1 million. So UPAF has been around almost 60 years. And I just joined after Labor Day. But what I will say is one of the best quotes about art and the importance of art comes from Pablo Picasso, who said, "Art wipes from our soul the dust of everyday life." Art wipes from our souls the dust of everyday life. And so when we look at the importance of arts, it's the importance for us as a community, for our souls, but also, as Joel led off with, the economic impact of Milwaukee's arts is $335 million. So people aren't coming to Milwaukee because of the weather. It's amazing that you all showed up today. People are coming to Milwaukee because we have a personality, and we have a Great Lake, and we have the Bucks, and we have the Brewers, and we have an arts scene, and now we're a foodie city. So if we want to keep that, and if we want to attract and retain talent, we need to invest in these arts. So what's the call to action? Threefold. So UPAF is a philanthropic organization, and what I can say is I look around the room and I want to just say thank you, because there are so many leaders of businesses who are giving a corporate gift, who are running a giving campaign, and we can say, yes, giving campaigns are a little iffy now because of the hybrid workforce, but they are still bringing in $2.7 million to the sector each year, with possible more going on. Thank you for the corporate gifts from foundations, the sponsorships, the bike ride across the home. So philanthropically, the call to action is keep giving. Thank you. Then the second call to action is this moment of the Greater Milwaukee Committee can't do it all. and we need to coalesce and come together. And so our board has recently passed a resolution that we are going to have an ex officio committee of the board made up of some leaders from board members from our member groups, from leaders from the community who are coming together to come up with some answers, and we will not say we have those answers. I think you've provided a little pathway here, but how can we make sure we access federal funding, state funding, local funding? How can we accelerate our fundraising? There's a great brain trust in this room, and so my call to action is if you have a company, activate your company's philanthropy. I'll take calls any time of day. But also, if you have the opportunity to, and ideas, and understand possibly some pathways to government funding, we want to be a convener, and not the only convener, but because of our ability to be in relationship with these 14 member groups and then even additional affiliates, we believe we're in a place to bring folks together and be community, and together really wipe some dust from our souls.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So with that, I want to thank the panelists here, all of whom I'm not only lucky to work on a professional level, but personally happy to call friends and colleagues. And your commitment to this community is unparalleled, and we really appreciate all your insights. And this should be a leaping off point from here. So we're going to take just a few minutes to talk to each other at the tables. There's a question that there it is. It just came back up. All Heather needs to do is walk up, and things happen. But you know, the couple things to discuss. One, around this notion of advocacy, and I want to make sure that we're clear that, you know, there are people in this room. One of the things about the Greater Milwaukee Committee is we are cross-sector, and there are people in this room who are working on social service issues, on your own economic development issues, on education. All of those hold a high priority. And part of the question for us to talk about here as a launching off point is where can there be some joint advocacy, as Anne-Marie just discussed. There's going to be something that UPAF and others in the community are going to be part of. Where can we fit in? Where does that go? And then also just kind of where does the GMC membership fit in this moving forward? So we'll have a conversation at your tables and there are people who are populated around the room who have different perspectives on this. Have that conversation for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Come back together briefly, and then we'll let you go for the day. So thank you again to our panelists. All right, I hate to interrupt good conversation that's happening, but we also want to, if possible, just share a little bit out or have things that came up at your tables that people may want to get a chance to disclose to the rest of the group. So we're going to do this for just a couple of minutes, and then Peggy's got her usual send-off that she's going to do. But anybody out there, whether you're from the arts community or whether you're from the greater community who just wants to offer up something for discussion for a few minutes? Heather's got the mic.
Yes.
Chaz Mulcahy.
So Chaz Mulcahy, I've been a member of the GMC since 1976, so I'm old, and I served on the county board for 12 years. We just talked about, and I wanted to share a thought with you, I think in a way we're missing the boat for the future. We're 50th in the country in state funding. Do we want to be 50th in anything? So how do we do that? I think we have to get involved with both political parties at the grassroots when they announce they're running for public office, and meet with them and talk to them about what is the importance of the arts and why is this so critical to our community. Because when you get to Madison and you're talking about meeting before the Joint Finance Committee or whoever it might be, I think it's too late then. They can't look at you like, well, why are they here? What do they want this time? Milwaukee, you know, that type of thing. It has to be personal relationships. And all these people together, you all can reach out. Different people, different parties, different geographic locations, and start this at the grassroots.
Thank you. And one thing I would offer up, and I think it's a reflection and a reaction to what this mayor, this county executive, frankly, that lots of people here, this business and civic community did around the efforts to elevate funding for local units of government in Milwaukee and around the state, is those relationships are as strong as they've ever been. Now, 25% of the legislature is now new. There's been a whole host of new people there, so some of those have to be cemented. But I know, the relationships between local elected officials and Madison here are about as strong as they ever have been. And I think we need to continue to leverage that, whether it's on issues related to the arts and culture, or on education, or on any number of things. Like pushing those relationships that we have established and I think it would be a shame if we didn't continue to push those in some ways. But the point is certainly well taken. You get 30 seconds.
Yeah, great, thank you. Building on what was heard here today, fascinating discussion, and what Charles Mulcahy just said, there's a link that I'm hoping Rob will go deeper into at some point, the economic link between creativity and economic success. Who is it fighting in, like a heavyweight with a lightweight budget? I mean, that's amazing. $25 billion in economic impact on $18 million. Who does that? Nobody can deliver that. But I think if we understand more deeply the importance of the creativity, it starts. I was just telling you about my 5-year-old. I'm a first-time husband, first-time father, and it's amazing the creativity that builds in through the artwork that they do at work. That's critical for someone who teaches and trains entrepreneurship. Without that creativity, we're dead in the water. Establishing that link between GDP and the creativity in the arts goes a long way to getting, whether it's public funding, private funding, or all of the above. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else with the last reflection or two, or a question that came up? Oh, Christine's got one in the back there. And Christine is new in her role at Imagine MKE, just started within the last few months as well.
Hi, everybody. I know many of you in the room. Christine Honacki, the executive director for 6 weeks now at Imagine MKE. I just want to thank the panel, because this has been a discussion as I've been with United Performing Arts Fund. Thank you, Anne Marie, for your comments. Very important organization to the community. Again, as Anne Marie said, thank you, everyone. You all support the arts in such a great way. One of the reasons I came to Imagine MKE, because this is a broader conversation. And as an advocacy, being one of our pillars, advocacy amplifying the arts and culture in Milwaukee, we really think this needs to be a broader conversation. I think it was said on the panel that it needs to be a shared vision, not just Milwaukee, but Milwaukee, Madison, and around the state. And so Imagine MKE kind of started for this purpose. We didn't know we would go through the pandemic and then be at this moment in time, but we want to be a part of the conversation. We want to lead the conversation. And so I just wanted to share that with the room. And then thank you for all the comments again that were shared on stage and in the room.
Thank you, Christine. And I'm going to invite up Peggy to make her final comments. And I don't know that, I think there'll be other opportunities to do this, but we just announced that Dave will be the incoming board chair, and I think it's clear to everybody who's been around the Greater Milwaukee Committee for the last few years that he has big shoes to fill with Peggy. And I just want to personally say what an honor it has been to work with Peggy for the last 2 years. You know, when you are, you need to be the right person at the right time, and for me coming into an organization new, to be honest, Peggy was probably the person I knew least on the selection committee for the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and you know, whether they chose wisely, you can decide on your own at some other time. But her outreach and her investment in me and in this organization and in our staff and our culture over the last 2 years has been a sight to behold, and something I really appreciate just having been part of. So thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Joel. Very much appreciate that. More to come next month from me on that. Suffice it to say, at this moment in time, this has truly been a privilege, honestly, to serve in this role, and I look forward to doing it for another month and then handing it to you, Dave. So thank you for joining us for today's important conversation. Milwaukee's arts and culture institutions are truly part of the fabric of Milwaukee's infrastructure. And therefore, they play significant roles not only in making Milwaukee a world-class city, but they play significant roles in the GMC's strategic priority as it relates to Milwaukee. It was with this recognition about the importance of the arts and our culture institutions, frankly, that brought the GMC into existence many, many decades ago. And the GMC remains committed to ensuring the vibrancy of these institutions for many decades to come. As you know, a key priority for the GMC as we carry out our strategic direction is identifying how we can best convene and collaborate with others to identify solutions to the challenges facing our community. Thank you, Anne Marie, for offering some tangible opportunities to further engage with this work. And Secretary Sayers, Rob, and Steve, we very much appreciate you speaking to our members about the realness of this challenge and how your organizations are responding, and frankly, how all of our organizations can respond. Thank you for all you continue to do for our community. Milwaukee's cultural institutions, including, again, the space we are sitting in today, are an asset to each of us. We look forward to sharing future spaces with you in 2025. And in that regard, I'm pleased to say that WEC Energy Group, my employer, will be hosting the February meeting at the historic Public Service Building Auditorium. If you haven't been there, it's quite an amazing thing to have a historic auditorium in a corporate headquarters, and it's going to be a really short commute for me. Today's meeting is officially adjourned, but now for the monthly giveaway. You know you have to continue this monthly giveaway thing, right, Dave? Courtesy of UPAF, 2 vouchers for a UPAF Cornerstone member performance at, take your pick, First Stage, the Florentine Opera, the Milwaukee Ballet, the Milwaukee Rep, Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, or the Skylight Theater. Go to Sue Ila. You're welcome. Congratulations. Enjoy your afternoon. Stay warm.